Hey guys, and welcome back again to Rage Gaming, and more prepare for a Shadow of the Erdtree talk. I recently covered a list of great weapons to consider for the start of the DLC, but now it's time to get specific and talk about builds. Here's 5 with the real details of what you'd run with a specific weapon setup and why. These are also some of the strongest choices you can make for boss killing specifically. Obviously, it's important to have a strong build to even enter the DLC with, since it's basically required to kill Mohg in his palace, which amazingly, over 60% of say the Steam player base of Elden Ring has currently never achieved. Hopefully any one of these builds could be an easy solution to that, so let's begin. We start with the most effective, straightforward choice you can make. It's a build centered around the well-known, potentially best overall weapon in the game, the Blasphemous blade. The key to this build for boss killing is indeed the Ash of War, Taker's Flames, to make that an effective way to chunk them down over and over. The result is going to be a lot of long-range DPS, but also a ton of healing, helping you sustain for a fight while punishing even the smallest DPS windows that the boss might offer. A big part of that is just how comfortable and simple this playstyle actually is, because you're just slamming the Ash of War whenever you're given a chance, even from far away. This setup in particular makes use of, say, the Bull Goat's armor, but you can use lighter armor, resulting in, lower endurance needed, and that's probably going to be what most people think about. So the weapon effect heals you on kill, but the Ash will also heal you 10% of your maximum health per use. That's a big deal. The point of this build then is to pump vigor, get loads of increased max health, so that healing that 10% is actually a lot more in value. Slamming out many of these ashes during a fight is more than enough to kill anything in the original game, even Millennia. And with the conversations of the DLC and its difficulty being somewhat comparable to Millennia, this build will meet that bar very casually. So here's what we're doing with this setup. We run the Blasphemous blade in two-hand while using the Erdtree seal in the offhand whenever we actually need to use it to cast. The purpose of those casts will be to increase our damage with buffs and debuffs to the enemy. That's going to be in the form of Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength as buffs, which increase your physical and also fire damage while active. The other encounter we run is Greyol's Roar, which deals some nice physical damage in AoE, but the main thing is the debuff. It reduces the enemy's attack by 15%, but also lowers their defense by another 10% for a full minute. So they're dealing less damage, but we deal more to them. If you want to min-max that concept, you could run the Dragon Communio Seal on top of everything, just to make the Roar deal a bit more damage. But after you've got yourself buffed up and the enemy debuffed, you just start spamming the Ash into them, farming chunks of health and healing a load too. Okay, so for equipment, like I say, we're running Bull Goats in this footage, this example, but you can run whatever you like if that's too heavy for you. For Talisman, we run the Shard of Alexander for the big boost to the Ash of War damage. We have Erdtree's Favor +2, that gives us more health, stamina, and equip load. We can also run the Dragon Crest Great Shield for a big boost to physical damage negation, becoming more tanky. And then also the Crimson Amber Medallion for a big increase to our max health. With that in mind, we'd also recommend Morgoth's Great Rune for another big boost to max health. And then with the Wondrous Physic, we can increase the damage with Flame Shrouding Crack Tear for fire damage, and then more health with a Crimson Spill Crystal Tear. Again, even more max health. So with all that, you can use your Rune Arc, cast self buffs, drink your Wondrous Physic, debuff the enemy with the Roar, and then just spam the Ash for an easy win. In terms of stats, we aim for 60 Vigor, 32 Mind to have the health and FP to work with. You could drop the Mind a bit. The Endurance is whatever you need to run the armor you've chosen. Strength will need to be 22 with Dex 15. Arcane needs to be 17, with the rest of the levels being dumped on Faith. Pushing that all the way to 80 if you can, if you keep leveling past 150. But with that, you should now have what you need to run one of the easiest and most reliable builds in the game. Next up then, let's talk bleed. And for that, we have a simple combo of 2 curved swords with bleed as the main source of damage. What weapons are these? Well, technically it's 2 scavenger curved swords for the fantastic base damage and bleed build up. However, if you aren't able to get a friend to drop a second scavengers, or you don't want to go into New Game Plus to get another, you could make use of a bandit's curved sword as the second option. The main attack here though is actually jump attacks. The power stance curved sword moveset is really good, but it's particularly the running attack combo for multiple hits in one go and the jump attacks that allow for this incredible amount of hits in a really short time. Importantly, you can also increase the value of those jump attacks to make them more potent, and it's also quite fun to press yourself against a target and just jump attack over and over. Most of the bosses in the original game were bleedable, so you could carry yourself with this concept alone. We do need to keep in mind the potential of how popular and potent bleed was for boss killing in the original game though. If they're aware of that and do something about it in the DLC, we need to be prepared for that, but they've given us no indication that they're doing that or even care, so there's every chance that bleed builds will be top tier for boss killing again. Right, so the basis of the build is very simple. You maximize the bleed potential and spam jump attacks on a target. While it's true that Seppuku, the main buff that we're using here, is now nerfed compared to before, meaning you benefit less AR, and also, you take more damage when you apply it. That only really mattered in PvP. In PvE, the damage is fine, and the buff is still fantastic. During the fight, if you do run out of the buff, you can reapply it to your main hand weapon, and that should be fine. Also, if you're unaware, to apply seppuku to both weapons, you need to two-hand your offhand weapon, then apply seppuku, then go back to power stance, and then use it again, and that'll go to your main hand, and now both of them will be buffed. So, if applying outrageous amounts of bleed in burst appeals to you, this is a very straightforward build. We have 2 curved swords in a cult, whether that's 2 scavengers or 1 scavenger and 1 bandit. Both weapons will have the Ash of War seppuku on them. And again, we'll run a cult to take the arcane scaling to a B rating, increasing your blood loss build up with that, but also increasing your physical damage while you level your arcane. That's become the optimal option because while, you could go for bleed and get more procs with that, you lose out so much on the raw damage that a cult is just better. For your seal, you'll naturally want the Dragon Communion seal since it scales perfectly with our main stat of arcane. And for equipment, you will of course wear the White Mask for the bonus AR after a bleed proc, the Raptor's Black Feathers chest, which will increase the damage on your jump attacks, and then it's whatever you like for your gloves and legs. For talismans, we naturally wear the Bloodlord's Talisman for again more damage after a bleed proc, and importantly, the Claw Talisman to enhance those jump attacks further. Then we have the Rotten Winged Sword Insignia and Millicent's Prosthesis for a great increase to successive attacks. Basically, the more hits you land in a short time, the more AI you get. The jump attacks deal loads of little blows at once, so that scales that damage quickly. Because of that, we also run the Thorny Cracked Tear in a Wondrous Physic for more successive attack power. The other one that you run in the Physic is up to you. Green Burst could be good for extra stamina recovery. Also with that seal, you can run at least Flame Grant Me Strength to buff the damage, and there's even Golden Vow if you want to commit to that more. In our setup though, at 150, for max damage we run 42 Vigor, 15 Mind, 13 Endurance, 17 Dex, 16 Intelligence, 15 Faith, and 80 Arcane. However, I'd recommend you drop some points in Arcane and aim for 50 or even 60 Vigor for better survivability. It's less damage, but you might have a chance to survive some attacks when you're learning, which is important in a new DLC. But that's the very basic max bleed setup. Next up, for our third recommended boss killing build, we have to go with the fantastic Dark Moon Greatsword. This intelligence option results in a very cost-effective playstyle that works really well up close or at medium range, dealing big hits per heavy attack. You can also work in the combo of a shield and staff, like the Jellyfish Shield to get even more damage, and the staff can be used for utility spells. The actual weapon itself also benefits a lot from stacking intelligence after hitting the strength requirements. Most of your gameplay revolves around buffing up the sword and then spamming out the heavy attacks for these fast magic arcs, though when you can fully charge it for the big hits, you will ideally do that. Also, because it's a frost weapon, you build up some decent frost status, especially when buffed. When that procs, that's going to mean an extra burst of damage on the target, but also a debuff. That debuff will increase the damage the target takes by 20% for 30 seconds. That's phenomenal. On top of that, we also make use of Terra Magica, a rune we place down that while we stand in it, we get a 35% magic damage buff to enjoy. So a suitable build will center around that concept of buffing yourself, debuffing the enemy, and applying as many magic charged heavies as you can. With the arc being faster to fling out these days, it's even easier to do, and you don't always have to fully charge every time. Many punish windows are shorter, so a quick slam is usually good. To run this, we'll of course use the Dark Moon Greatsword and then the Carrion Regal Scepter Staff for spells. In your shield slot, we run the Jellyfish Shield because its Ash of War provides a nice AR buff. We also run the full Spellblade set for even more passive magic damage, and you could also consider a seal to get the basic buffing cants if you want to maximize. For talisman, we have the standard options of Alexander Shard, the Magic Scorpion Charm for more magic damage, the Godfrey Icon to help with the charge hits, and finally, the Ritual Sword Talisman for more damage while you're full health, so you want to play around that. Then we have the Wondrous Physic. We run Magic Shrouding Cracked Tear, more magic damage. The second's up to you though, anything for utility. For stats, we suggest 60 Vigor, 22 Mind, 20 Endurance, 16 Strength, minimum Dex, and then as much Intelligence as you can get. We aim for 60, but even more could be more damage. If you have leftover stats, put it into Faith so you can get some of those buffs, Flame Grant Me Strength, and Golden Vow. You could also run less Vigor for more damage, but you will be squishier. But that's the Dark Moon setup. Let's now talk about a caster, the most popular one. It's time for the return of the incredibly popular first playthrough build, the Comet Azur Comedy, just setting up and beaming a boss until it dies. Something about this build appealed to so many players originally, so I'm expecting a big comeback. Maybe it's because it's so straightforward, there's no dodging or mechanics to worry about, you just set up and then beam into the boss. The hard part is the timing of the beam and the setup beforehand. And since the beam is continual, with the right build, you can maintain it for a kill. If that stays on the target the whole way, most things do die. So the execution of that is pretty important. Obviously, some bosses will start a fight by slowly walking towards you conveniently or worrying about buffing themselves up. You get the window to blast them. Some bosses are more agile and difficult for this concept, so you may want to use a weaker version or alternative spells just for that fight. Most of the time though, it works incredibly and will crush the boss. And obviously, it looks incredible. So here's a quick rundown of how to use the setup. The base equipped spells are of course Comet Azur and Terra Magica, and then anything else you want to run. Terra Magica provides a 35% magic buff while you stand on the rune, so you must have that down before channeling out the Comet. It consumes a ton of FP when you cast it, and then hold to maintain. So naturally, we need a setup that counters the extreme FP cost, which we will do with a physic. Equipment wise, we want Lusat's Glintstone Staff. It makes your spells cost more, but they deal more damage. In the offhand, we could consider the Jellyfish Shield for that buff. For the outfit, we'll run the Azur outfit with a Glintstone Crown, increasing Azur spells, again costing more FP. For talismans, we have Graven Mass, Graven Skull, Magic Scorpion, and Ritual Sword. All the magic damage increases, and then the one that increases your damage while you're full health. For Wondrous Physic, we make sure to run the Cerulean Hidden Tear. For that all-important 15 seconds of no FP cost, that's how we maintain the channel for the Comet and the opening of the fight. Otherwise, you also run Magic Shrouding Cracked Tear, again more magic damage. For your simple stat setup, we run 60 Vigor to survive the threats, but you definitely could drop that number for a more glass cannon setup, because that's the concept of this build, saving you some points. We run 25 Mind, enough endurance based on your setup, minimal strength and dex, which should be 20 and 14 if you're running the Jellyfish Shield. Finally, up to 80 intelligence based on how much you commit to vigor. With all that ready, you can pop your buffs, blast with comets as accurately and as long as possible. The timing of that's down to you, but with the correct timing and placement, everything will die on the very first cast. But that now brings us to the last build to talk about, and for a different kind of boss killer, I'm going with the Marais Executioner Sword, the successive hit build. You do a charge attack and hit many successive hits. These many hits in combo scale your AR, which means every tick of damage is stronger than the last. With a fast follow-up with a second Ash, you can reach unreal damage, corkscrewing through their health. Something about this is very unique. Maybe it's the forced nature of the weapon, how cool it just feels. Greatswords in general have received small buffs multiple times. They have a smoother, more effective moveset, but I'm not pretending that the real strength of this is the greatsword. It's the Ash of War, that's where all the damage is, so that's how you play. If the idea of chainsawing through health bars does appeal though, this is top tier. We can't deny the DPS potential. Also, it's an arcane weapon that's not bleed, which is nice, and if bleed is something that gets counted in the DLC, this could be a great consideration. So the build setup is very straightforward. We have the Marais Executioner Sword, we combine that with a Dragon Communal Seal for your incants. Further, any light staff so you can cast Terra Magica, that's the goal. For armor, it's whatever you want to run, the most resistant options that also allow you to function in terms of weight. To commit to max damage though, you could run the Spellblade set, but you'll be more squishy. In terms of the talisman, we have the Alexander Shard for Ash damage, the Godfrey icon since it is a charged attack, and naturally the Rotten Wind Sword insignia and Millicent's Prosthesis for successive damage increases. With that seal, we make sure to run the 2 damage buffs of Golden Vow and Flame Grant Me Strength, and finally with the Wondrous Physic, we run the Thorny Cracked Tear and Magic Shrouding Cracked Tear. For stats then, we run 55 Vigor, 26 Mind, and 15 Endurance. Then we have 37 Strength, 19 Dex, and 34 Int. Finally, we have the 25 Faith and 23 Arcane as the other stat requirements. With that, you're set up to corkscrew your way to victory with a very unique weapon indeed. But there you have it. That's 5 great picks and how to run them properly. As always though, there's way more you could consider, but I hope this is a nice variety with the detail you need to get something quick and effective going right now. Questions still remain though. Will status be the strongest thing in the DLC? Will bleed even be viable? How will the new weapons stack up to the originals, just in terms of raw DPS and power? We're going to soon see, and we're going to be making content to cover all of this stuff. Until next time then, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thanks for watching.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.